All right. Ready, team? All right. Good evening. I will now call to order the February 26th, 2026 regular Finance Commission meeting. Tatiana, please take the roll call.
Commissioner Giuliani,
Here.
Commissioner Ho,
Here.
Commissioner Rubin, Vice Chair Quaid,
Here.
Chair Staton Trahan.
Here.
We have quorum.
Thank you. In an effort to better manage the business on the agenda, general public comment will be limited to 30 minutes at the beginning. If there are speakers remaining in the queue, they will be heard at the end of the meeting. If you'd like to make a public comment for items not listed on the agenda, please submit a public comment card or raise your hand via Zoom. Tatiana, are there any public comments in person or on Zoom?
We have one public comment on Zoom. Josh Betta.
Right. Take that now.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Sound check. Nevin, am I okay?
We can hear you.
Super. Anyway, good to be back around a table with you. What we're beginning to see, we're at the launching place, the jumping off spot, where your new staff has created a perfect control over facts and details. And this is everything that we have wanted for the last 5 years. So with the City Council's leadership, in particular, Janet Braun for laying the foundation of leadership last year, we're exactly where we want to be right now. And so with the mid-year report and the 2 audits that the city has seen within 4 months' time, you're in position. City Council's in position. And I couldn't be more pleased than where we find ourselves today. And the thank yous go around the room. They go to the entire City Council, as much as I don't want to thank certain people on the City Council. But I'm growing up. I just wanted to acknowledge those things. Nick, I see Mark Siegfried in the crowd. You got a hell of a man running your controllership. And I'll stop right there. I hope we have a really good meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. Anyone else, Tatiana?
There are no other public comments.
Great. All right. We'll move on. We'll move on to the consent calendar. So items listed under the consent calendar are considered by the Finance Commission to be routine in nature and will be enacted by one motion unless a public comment has been received or a commissioner requests otherwise, in which case the item will be moved for separate consideration. Do we have any members of the public wishing to speak on a consent calendar item?
No.
Do any commissioners have any comments or questions for items under the consent calendar?
I have a question. Tatiana, pardon me. As I look at the minutes, and I look at the second page of minutes under recommendation, is that a typo there on November 30th? Do you see what I'm talking about?
Under number 4.
Under number 4. And then, okay. Again, small thing. I just wanted to push it up, point it out. Okay.
Yeah, I'll fix that.
Perfect. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'd like to actually pull number 3, the treasurer's report. Anyone else? Okay. All other items, would someone like to make a motion? I think it's just the minutes at this point.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor? Say aye.
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 All those opposed, say nay. Great. All right. Do we want to start with number 3 now, or do we pull it to the end? Just do it now. Okay.
Yeah.
So, we've pulled item number 3, the treasurer's report, and I think the reason why I wanted to pull it, I just wanted to give Zen an opportunity maybe to, I think you've been asking a little bit about sort of the cash in and cash out, and we have a presentation of it here in the treasurer's report. Just wanted to see if you wanted to chat about that or something you've been curious about.
It's something we've all been curious about, as far as the monthly cash in, cash out, and thanks to Mark, we've, finally pulled this together. Um, so unless you have a specific question about it, it's really kind of documenting their, it's documenting the fund flows in that sense. Otherwise, there's nothing really to note. Yeah.
Zen, how's the relationship with the new money manager going?
It's going well. They seem very responsive. They are very, they're on top of it. Their system is pretty comprehensive. We get a compliance report every month from them, checking off, making sure that they are within our investment framework guidance, and we get our investment report from them on a much more timely basis than in the past. So things are going well. Returns have been good. So overall, I think we're happy with the relationship.
Thank you for everything you did to make that happen.
And if I may, Chair, I just wanted to add, since you pulled it, I just wanted to add the on the uh, graphs.
Yeah.
I think it's just we wanted to make it like show the council sort of the commission sort of the cadence of how money comes in and money goes out. So you can see on the cash in, it's fairly standard that we get a lot of cash in December and then again in April. Those are sort of the two big cash in periods due to the property tax. On the cash out, you can see that our accounts tend to get drained quite a bit for the first few months of the year, and then it sort of evens out as so. So the cash out is a lot more, and you'll see that actually as part of our kind of the monthly budget reports that we'll talk about later this evening. You'll see that we sort of money steadily goes out the door throughout the year, but our revenues come in. We don't get much during the first couple years of the months of the fiscal year, but we gain it back toward the end. So, and I did want to say this. I think we're at a better spot and have a better handle on our cash now that we can work with the city treasurer on maybe investing a little bit more because taking a little bit more out of the money market. So I also wanted to thank Mark on getting us to a point where we feel better and there's a little more transparent about how money flows in and out, and then so we can feel better about how much needs to be liquid versus how much we can invest.
Yeah, that was exactly my question. It seems like we have some, maybe we can put some more into some of the long-term investment.
Yeah, we can. But even our short-term investments right now are earning money because we put even our bank deposit is sitting in a money market account, which is earning short-term interest rates, which, high yielding short-term interest rates, which is not a bad situation. Which I just wrote this down, is that historically we've put our bank balance on here, but I'm wondering, is it worthwhile to have figure out what our year-to-date interest is in that money market kind of, since it is making a decent amount of chunk change for us now?
One more quick question, and if I recall, when we were looking at money managers last year, we also had a separate investment advisor through, was it Morgan Stanley? Are we still incurring those fees? And
We've canceled we've stopped all relationship with Morgan Stanley for now. So before we were paying we were paying Morgan Stanley and Western Asset and Zions. Right now we're paying just Payden and Zions being our custodian. So that has remained steady. So our assets still sit with a third party that's not Payden. Payden manages it. But we're no longer paying for Morgan Stanley.
okay, thank you.
That's great. All right, thanks, Ed. Thanks, Nick and Mark. Yeah, let's let's take the vote on that one. Does anyone want to move approval of the treasurer's report?
I move that we approve the treasurer's report as presented.
All
Well,
those in favor, oh, go ahead, sorry.
Second, yes.
All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. Great, motion carries. All right, with that, I think we're gonna move on to number 4. So I think there's a presentation prepared. Who's up?
William, is there anything substantially different in your presentation than is in our packet? It just, okay, thank you. That's helpful. No surprises, William.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, Madam Treasurer, and Council Member Braun. So this is actually, I haven't done a mid-year in a while. This is like my first one, at least here at the city. One of the things I would like to go over before jumping into the numbers and stuff is kind of talk about the purpose of why we do a mid-year. And it's basically we review the revenues and expenditures and kind of and watch their performance throughout the mid-year, right? And so what we do is we compare the actuals to the current budget to identify if there's any risk or even opportunities in the budget. And this is just to avoid any surprises at year end and then make any adjustments so that we're always within budget throughout the fiscal year. And I guess the benefit or the objective of this is to provide transparency to City Council and other stakeholders, and to be able to provide or support informed policy and spending decisions. Okay, so when discussing the major revenues and expenditures, sometimes we jump and think about the levels at where they should be. Mid-year, we say, oh, they should be at 50%, right? But the revenues and expenditures, and I think Nick just touched on it just before I came up, the city does not receive the revenue, and we do not expend the expenditures at a uniform rate. And so then the question becomes, well, how do I know if we're on track to meet the budget? How do we know if we're under budgeted, super funded? And so what we do is, at least one of the methods that we use is that we take a look at prior levels from prior years. And this graph kind of depicts that. So for fiscal year 25-26, our revenues are at 34% of the budget. Our expenditures at 45.6%. And so if you only look at that year, you're going, oh, wow, we are really spending more than what we have, right? But if you take a look at the other years, kind of get a feel of what our past rates or past levels have been. And so if you take a look at the past 4 years, the average revenue rate has been 35.9%. Right now we're at 34, so we're just slightly under the average. And for the expenditures, we're at 45%. And so for fiscal 25-26, we're at 45.8. So I mean, we're on track. We're on track to meet our budget. So I'm going to start with some of the major revenue categories in the budget, and they consist of property tax, sales tax, utility tax, and a category called other taxes. So for these four major revenue categories, they represent about 67% of the total general fund revenues. Our property tax is really the lion's share of our revenues, and that 59% is just 59% of the budget among the four categories. Okay. So property tax is at 40.1%. Average percentage in the past has been 39.5%, but we're there. We're there. Okay. For sales tax, at 34.2%, and our average for prior years is 32%. So we're doing a little bit above average there. Our utility user tax, that is at 39.4%, and the average is 39.2. So I mean, as you can see, we're pretty dead on where we should be.
Hey, William, just for clarification's sake, this is as of December 31, 2025. Yeah?
Okay. Very good.
Then that's a question.
That's
Cool.
correct. That is correct. Yes. And so for our other taxes, we're at 25.4%. And so as of December 31st. Okay. So the average over the past 3 years is at 36.3. So here's where I take a little bit closer look at what's going on. Why are we off, right, on the collections of the revenues in this category? And so
Sorry, William, for clarification, the average in other taxes for prior years, you're saying is 36?
the average is 36.3%, yes.
Okay, because in the in the package we received, it said it was 51.2 in prior years.
Yeah.
So I was just curious.
I'll take a look at that. So if you go to attachment number 1, page 1, or page 1 of 7, there's a table there with all of the revenue categories. And let me see if I'm on the right one. I'm sorry. This would be page 2 of 7, where it says the 4 major general fund categories. Okay. In there, I had some notes, right? And so I go into them, and other taxes is pretty much made up of the franchise taxes that the city receives, the revenues they receive, right? And so for the cable TV franchise, we've received about 19.3%, and the average is 22.6. This is something that we need to keep a closer eye on and make any adjustments later on if necessary. The revenues for the franchise gas tax and the electric, those aren't collected until the second year. So we have 0 collected so far. So we know that we should be receiving those in a few months, and then determine whether we're on track or not. And the other major one is their franchise refuse, and that was a little bit lower than the average. But I checked this week, and we received a big revenue collection for that, and so that puts us very close to where we should be. So I'm guessing this was just a little delay on the posting of the revenue, or yeah, I think that's probably the reason for that.
William, I think Commissioner Ho is looking at the first bullet point you have underneath that table.
Yes, and I can see now that 51.2 was specific to franchise revenue, right? So your 36% you're saying is for the total category of other taxes?
So in average, yeah, so
Okay.
altogether it was 50, yes.
Okay, got it.
Yes.
Yeah. William, do you know why franchise refuse was down so much?
Yeah, well, like I said,
I mean, that's Athens, right?
as I mentioned right now, I checked last week and
Mhm.
we did receive a big,
Yeah.
a big revenue deposit. It could have been that just a delay in the posting into the system, or I would have to check to see if with Public Works to see if there was any delay on on Athens being able to provide
Yeah.
provide that payment.
I know that Athens has changed their billing.
Mm.
We used to be billed every 2 months and every 3 months, once a quarter, and they are now billing monthly. So it's curious that the city is not receiving.
Yeah, so
Funds
that's
like-
yeah. So these are the type of things that we will keep an eye on, and
Mhm.
as we move forward, since we will be going to monthly budget reports, it's something that we will obviously take a closer look at and then find out if that continues, what the reason is. Yeah. Okay, so looking at the expenditures at mid-year as of December 31st, there's only two departments that are below the 50%. I'm sorry, above the 50%. And they are the police department and the finance department. And so one of the major expenses that the police department has had is the CalPERS UAL, the unfunded actuarial liability. And so what the city pays it during the beginning of the year in order to receive the discounted rate that we have. I think it's around 3.4%. And so that's what throws um, the police department over the 50% mark. Oh yeah, 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 yeah. The finance department. Well, the finance department has incurred in consulting fees at the beginning. Well, for the first quarter of the year, consulting fees and temporary help for accounting, accounts payable, accounts receivable, and these services were not budgeted for this year, and so as you'll see later on that it's going to be one of our enhancements. We're asking for some money because this is just something that we didn't foresee and need the funding for it.
Time
Yes.
spent, William,
Yes, that'll
correct?
be one
Yeah,
time.
that was just to get through the audit, the
Yes.
ACPR.
Yeah, and exactly. And the other thing is that we're implementing Springbrook, the cloud version, and so staff is really dedicated to learning how to implement it, and so we need the extra help to take care of the daily operations in accounting and accounts payable, and so that's why we have them.
Excuse me, William. One of the things that I found curious on page 4 of 17, a human resources. There were a number of actual expenses there, it looks like about 350,000. As I remember, and Todd's not here, so I'm going to have to ask you, Mark. Nick, pardon me. Didn't we roll human resources into the city manager's office? Into finance? Or yeah.
We did, so part of we did, but however we sort of undid that, I believe in September, we may have gone to city council to actually upgrade the HR and risk manager to a HR director. So when we created the HR director position, we actually sort of bifurcated. So there wasn't a net difference. We just basically took the budget out of the city managers and made HR its own department since they were going to have a director.
Very helpful. Thank you. I didn't realize you did that, Nick. I'm sorry. Or didn't remember.
He's a HR director, is the director, so that all directors report to the city manager. Through me sometimes if I get, if my ego gets a little bit big, but We all report to Todd at director level.
Okay. So, and in case you're wondering, the transfers, there's been year-to-date expenditures. And this is just basically, this is the subsidy that the general fund gives to the um, lighting and landscape maintenance district to cover their operating costs. The assessed or the revenues that the LMD brings in is not sufficient, and so general fund has to subsidize it.
Yeah. And on page 8 of 17, I'm looking at benefits. The reason for the actual being so much higher than the budget is that 3.9 that you paid in the beginning of the year. Yes?
All right.
UAL. Yep.
I don't have page numbers on mine. Okay, of the third party account.
Benefits, yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
got it. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So moving on. So now analyzing the expenditures rather by categories, we see that the benefits is one that's at 66%. And this again is just basically the UAL. That's what's causing that overage. The transfer, I just explained it. And the other expense is a small thing that I think that we're not going to expense that. So that's just something that shouldn't have been in the budget, but we'll for this year, we're going to correct that. So basically we're at 45.8% in expenditures. So that's pretty good place to be at mid-year.
I noticed with the police department, there was a high percentage of the overtime has been used.
Yes.
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 Now, is that as a result of open positions and we're using additional overtime?
Yes, that's correct. So, because there's about, let me see, there's like 6 vacancies currently
Yep.
in the police department, and so what's offsetting that overtime is the salary savings.
Yep.
And so that's one thing we've already spoken with the police department about it, and so we're going to keep a closer eye on it, making sure that if there's any of these positions are filled, that we should see a corresponding decrease in the overtime.
Yeah. And William, you remember back in the budget preparation in July and August, the question was asked, is the head count really a good number, or can we, which is the reason we asked that question is because this has been a recurring, I was going to say problem's not the right word, theme over the last 3 or 4 years where we have unfilled positions and we're using overtime. And I'm glad it's happening, and it looks like we're almost saving money. Okay, but I'm not even going to go down that road just yet.
That's something that we have. I mean, I think for the police department, they when we spoke to them for the mid-year meeting, they said they projected about 1.3 million as their final overtime. But I calculated the salary savings based on what we have now on the vacancies, and so we should be able to cover it as long as if we're going to keep those positions vacant the full year. If the overtime rate is going to be at the same rate, we don't increase it, then I think we should be okay. Managers.
That was the reason for the question back in July, August. Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you.
And if I may, I mean, I would just say it's not the law enforcement sort of industry has had a lot of trouble just in general recruiting new folks, or had a lot of trouble basically starting in 2020. I would say over the last 2 years or so, there's really been an uptick in people going into the law enforcement profession. So most cities had a lot of trouble, and you saw ridiculous signing bonuses from a lot of cities, like upwards of $50,000. So, but that's starting to change a bit. There's a lot more folks going into the law enforcement profession. So I believe even now we're pretty close. We've hired multiple people the last few months, and it takes a while before an officer sort of I mean, they always count, but before they can kind of be out on the street on their own, because they have to go through a pretty rigorous process before they become like an officer that can go out on their own. So it's usually about 18 months. So you'll probably see over the next year as we transition to, as we fill those positions. The overtime will sort of remain on the higher end. And, we'll start to spend more of those regular salaries because we don't have as many vacancies, but that'll be a temporary condition. And as soon as folks can be deployed on their own and they're trained up, then that overtime will fall. So from a budget standpoint, we're not trying to control the police department's operations. Obviously, they have to be out there. We just want to make sure the dollar amount we have out there is correct, and whether it's, whatever the mix of overtime versus regular salaries that they need in order to operate, we'll deal with it. We just want to make sure on the top line we have enough. And I think what Will said, with the mix of vacancies and overtime, we do plan to have, sufficient funding already in the budget for this year. So.
Thank you, Nick. And you may want to let the new chief of police know that that is just a condition we've been experiencing for years, and that he is going to get questioned on it. I just guarantee it next June. So somebody's going to ask the question from the city council.
Of course, and I guarantee in Phoenix, where the department he came from, they were having the exact same issues. So he'll be well prepared to answer it more articulately and knowledgeably than I have.
All right. So we've finance department staff is recommending various budget adjustments, and we could start with on the right-hand side. We have the revenues. So we're recommending an adjustment of 1.3 million in revenues. It has to do with the plan check fees and the building permit fees. And the reason for this increase is there's various large projects that have been approved in planning. And so community development feels that this projection is the adequate amount for this fiscal year in revenues for those projects.
Can I ask a quick question? Is this like a one-time thing, or can we expect this revenue ongoing? What do you think?
I think this is going to be a one-time. She didn't mention if this was going to be continuing, but Nick?
Yeah, this is certainly one time. It's related to specific developments, and it may be a one-time condition that sustains for a couple years, depending on how building goes. But these would not be ongoing revenues. They're to recover increased plan check activity, increased inspections, increased staff activity, bringing things to the planning commission. So that's what our fees offset that, and that's why there's a 1-to-1. You'll see there's also a $1 million increase on the building contract services. We have a contractor that provides that, so it's a bit of a pass through. Some of these fees, but yeah, they would be one time.
Can you go through the 1,045,000 in expenses and exact same amount in revenues and explain that to me, please?
Yeah.
I'm not quite getting it.
Okay. So the city uses TransTech. They charge 65% of the revenue that comes in for plan checks. And so the city keeps 35. And so what we're doing here is that we're being conservative on the revenue enough so that we can represent the 65% of the revenue that would come in. So actually, if this is correct, we should be receiving a bit more revenue, but we're not showing it now. All we're going to do is say we're going to do a 1-to-1. The revenues and expenditures are offset one another.
And what does TransTech do? What service are they providing?
They're our building official. Yes, so they do. So there are so when you come in, so we have our planning department that takes in and looks at your initial plans.
Right.
But when you actually turn those into construction plans, we have a building official that makes sure that you're complying with all the building codes. And then when you go and have to get like your electrical sign off, that's all.
Right.
Those are all contracted out, and so the inspection services, TransTech does all of that. They also do some of our engineering permit review. So we don't have in town the building. You have to have very specific licenses to be able to do mechanical inspections, electrical inspections, and building inspect. So we don't have that expertise in house. So we use TransTech. So it's basically a pass through. The $1.3 million is between our building permits and our plan checks. So, we do keep a certain percentage of that. And so, that's why there's a little bit more than the 1.045, which is going towards Trans Tech. That's why I have 1.3 million, because that reflects the extra, 30% that we keep of those permits that pass through.
So just to clarify on that point, are you saying that the 268 represents the 35% share, but slightly conservatively under that? Or are we saying that it's not even on the revenue?
The 268 is sort of representing the 30 to 35%.
But not the full 35, right?
Correct. Because just because, again, we want to make sure we're estimating that we'll collect a lot of this revenue. We want to make sure that we don't want to overestimate the revenue and then spend it. So it's just a conservative approach. Go ahead.
But you are putting the expense, so like it should theoretically match up to that 65%, right? Otherwise, you are actually technically giving you guys yourself a buffer on the expense side then versus the revenue side, like unless you match that up mathematically.
We're actually giving ourselves a buffer on the revenue side as opposed to the expenditure side.
But
so
it's a inverse buffer.
So
it's understating
right. You're like a
conservative way
right.
We may if the $1 million, the $1,045,000 is spent on the expenditure side, that means we'll get in $1,350,000 in revenue. So we're just reflecting the $1 million expense in $1 million revenue as opposed to $1,350,000.
Right. And how do you determine that little bit of buffer? Just curious.
We just wanted to make sure, we really wanted to just reflect that we're offsetting what the increased expenditure would be with revenues. So that's why we didn't. So again, we'd rather be a little bit conservative on the revenue side. So it doesn't look like there's available revenues for additional enhancements for that at mid-year that may not necessarily come through at the end of the year.
So theoretically then, if we pay TransTech $1,045,000, we should be getting $1.6 million in.
Yes, yeah, if that's 35%,
yes.
if that's the 35, yes.
Yes, so 1.6 million, but you're saying we're gonna up our revenue by 1.3 million.
Correct.
So you're leaving a $300 million buffer where
300,000.
1,000 buffer where we naturally expect to then beat our revenue forecast.
Yes, so that's we're hoping, yes, that we get, like if it doesn't, again, if
So I guess my point is if we don't beat the 1.6, or if we end up only coming in at 1.3, we should only be allocating them 65% of 1.3 as the expense number to work with.
So if from an accounting perspective, if we're trying to be exact on the number from a budget, that's how we will account for it, right? It's the 65-35. From a budgeting perspective, again, we try to really take a conservative stance. So from a strict, 65-35, we would get in $1.6 million in revenue if we spend the $1,045,000. If we increase the if we increase all the way to $1.6 million, but there's not as much activity as we expected. So say we only spend $700,000, right? Then we'll only collect $1.2 million, and it will look like we're sort of way under our revenue budget.
But then
I guess my concern is just if we allocate the 1.3 in revenue, and then the 1.45 in expense, if we generate the 1.3 in revenue, we're only paying out, call it 800K in expense. There leaves the kind of like 200,000 of slush fund, or is there no such thing as a slush fund within the department anymore?
Yeah. So the expenditure side of it, we don't spend it unless we collect it, right? Because TransTech is keeping that. It's a pass through to TransTech. So I understand what you're saying is if at the end of the year there's that looks like there's a $200,000 savings, they're going to go spend it on something else. But that's not how this contract services, that's not how we handle that. It's if they don't spend it, they don't get to use it for something else. Since it's a pass through to specifically encumbered for a contractor, then if they don't spend it, it doesn't get, that expenditure just lapses.
Nick, if I may, I think what we're asking is if we're going to project out our expenditures, we should also project out our revenues. And I understand that's not the conservative approach, but I think it's what we're sort of asking about the 65-35 and not to have, and I understand you don't want to spend that delta potentially or expect it to come, but I think we're just trying to seek accuracy and reflect that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm comforted by the fact that this is kind of direct to one contract. That's not just, it becomes a slush fund of expenses for, other things that.
And I appreciate that, and I think again from a budget standpoint, right? Because we're trying to predict the future. We don't have the benefit of looking backwards and saying, oh, that's what we should have done. So we're trying to strike a balance between making sure there's enough expenditure authority for the department to operate for the rest of this year, based on what they think the activity will be, while also not providing so much leeway that, if that revenues that we're going to expect revenues to come in that don't come in that might be used somewhere else, right? If we did this and it looks like if we went up to $1.6 million, then it might look like we're going to have a $400,000 surplus this year, and then we don't want to overinflate that number because then city council may want to invest it in something, but we don't know that that's necessarily a real number yet, right? So we're just a little bit. That's why we want to try to be conservative, that we're sort of not overestimating revenues that could then be reallocated somewhere else.
Understood. Thank you.
I mean, from my perspective, I think it's fine to be a little conservative. It was just more of how did you land on that? Like, is it an arbitrary number and you're like, hey, let's pull 300,000 out, or was there some kind of methodology and we're going to be consistent every year on this? Or?
Yeah, it was actually in working with the community development department. So we're kind of using we were kind of using what they're sort of projecting through the end of the year for activity. So the $1,045,000 was really just to make sure we offset the contract services. So that's the 1-to-1 for the building contract services. And then they also were thinking there'll be additional building fees, and they gave us $268,000. So we took that number, understanding the 1.3 together, is sort of in line with the 30% above. So, again, it's not necessarily
the 65% off of the 1,045.
Yes.
So then so we're really underestimating then roughly there, because you're now saying we're only, because I think that the question before was the 268 part of the calculation that you take 65% off of, but it sounds like what you just said now is that that's a separate permit fee that's not paid to TransTech anyways.
So this 268,000 is also under sort of TransTech's purview because that's for building permits,
but
right?
Do they still take 65% off of the 268 as well?
No, well, the $1,045,000 is the total amount that we're expecting to pay them, whether it's for building plan check or for plan check fees or building permits. So they do both plan check fees and building permits. So the $1,045,000 is what's expected to be paid out if the level of activity happens. And then these two revenues are revenues that are generated through those. So the 65% is of the total of, includes both plan check fees, building permits. So that's broken down into a couple of different revenue categories because they cover a couple of different areas.
Yeah, so they take a 65% chunk of both of these line items.
Correct, but we're treating them as the 1.3 million is sort of.
I mean, if you could take 65 plus another 65, it's the same as treating it together. So each line item, they're taking 65% cut off.
I think what Nick is saying.
Expenditure side, yes. So like the 65% is off of the $1 million. So like you said, when you did 65%, if that's 1.6 million, that's the total amount we would get in. Whether it's where that 1.6 million is allocated, whether it's to plan check fees or building permits, that's kind of broken down based on where the activity was.
I think what I'm hearing is it's total expense is 1.45 million.
Mhm.
Our 35% is the 600,000.
Mhm.
But you've just parked that 600,000 conservatively as 268 under building permits, correct?
Correct.
Yes. So the total revenue projection is still 1.65. But he's parked some of that 35% as 268 under permit. You could have parked it under plan check fees, but he's chosen to
Lumped
just
it.
separate it.
It's to yeah, it came from working with community development. But basically these revenues, we're just spreading the revenues against, we're reflecting that they're not all of the revenues are not in plan check fees. They're in plan check fees, they're in building permits. So we're just spreading that total amount of revenue between these two, but the expenditure is 1,045,000.
Okay, so I think we just know that there could be 300,000 cushion.
Yeah.
That's
Yes.
all we're saying.
Hmm.
Okay.
All goes well.
If all goes
If all
as
goes,
expected.
yeah.
If it goes less than expected, we could only collect 700,000. So it all depends on how it's, then we spend less, exactly.
All right, so going on with the adjustments, the major budget adjustments, we have the staff reimbursement for wellness. This is basically a benefit to the employees, and the budget was adopted after the MOUs were negotiated. So we're just adding the funding for this after the fact. Well, we already went through the 1.1 million for Transtech. The next one is the Heartland. So we've one of the things we noticed that in our transaction fees, credit card transaction fees, is that it increased significantly. And so we actually had a meeting with Heartland, and they let us know that they increased it from 3% to 6% because we no longer had a contract with them. And so that explains why the increase. This is just to get us through, but Nick, can you talk to the credit card transaction?
So we did meet with them, and they are going to give us a credit back for some of
Right.
these. They're going to credit us to get us on a new contract. That said, we also it increased a lot more because a lot of these plan check fees people are paying through credit card. So we also work with community development to encourage people to pay when they're larger amounts, pay.
Why don't we
check
just
and do other-
charge a credit card fee if you choose to pay by credit card?
So we do have a convenience fee that was not sufficient to cover this at the time. So that's why we're doing a fee study, and we are going to be looking at making sure that those are
Cover it.
sufficient to cover the full amount. And again, part of it was because Heartland's the credit card processors went up above what our credit card fee was. So we do expect to be getting some sort of credit back against to credit against possibly some of this, but also understanding that we need to. And I don't know what exactly our percentage is. It might be like a 1.5% convenience fee, but as we know, many credit cards now charge the 3% plus. If you're some of the other credit cards that have higher rewards points actually charge even more. So,
And
we
Nick, can I
need
just
to-
ask, and to your point, I think that you're making is we can't just increase it. The city council has to approve it. There's a whole fee schedule for everything we do. And to approve it, you're going to have the fee study to justify the
Can
increase.
we just not offer a choice to pay by credit card
Good question.
until we figure out this fee situation, right?
So that's what we've worked with community development is to request any sizable from the applicant be a check.
Like $500 and above, please,
Yes, right.
send us a check or ACH.
Yes,
Right.
and the ACH and the check are both options that we prefer, and they said they would be happy to.
Yeah. So, I
Is that what we
mean,
want?
maybe since we can't up our fee, we can just nix the offering for now.
Can we do that without any kind of other approvals?
Yes, I mean, we're certainly we're just asking for payment in a different form.
Yeah.
And just an update on the fees, we're actually going through the fee study right now, so we expect that to come to council sometime in April, so that we'll have a new fees in effect for July.
Yeah. Remind us of that when you bring it to us. Okay.
Mhm.
And that's a fee study for the whole city, not just the
Yeah,
Blanchard.
I mean, so I figure that would take a while before it, but like in the meantime, just say no more credit card payments until we figure this out. Yes, a bag of cash or gold. I mean,
Get some crypto in there.
yes.
Go ahead.
Oh, are they still the best offering for fees for credit card, or do we need to figure out if they're the right vendor for credit card transactions?
We are actually working on an RFP to figure out if they're the right vendor for credit card transactions. So that's a large maybe, but we're definitely looking because
Well, I just feel like as a supplier to just increase your fee by double and not even notify you, does
Yeah.
not instill confidence in the relationship.
It's not a good fee.
I 100% agree. We did not, we expressed to them our loss of confidence. So, it's really just a matter, we just have to identify and make that transition, which we are looking. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
All right. So the next budget adjustment is the funds to pay for, as I mentioned earlier, the consulting and temporary staff of the city with the finance department. Again, we did not plan to have them for the extended period of time we have them, and so that's what we're asking for. And the last one is
And William, that should get us through the end of the year, right?
yes, the end
Okay,
of the year.
good.
Yeah. And so the Tesla lease is currently being funded in Fund 105, which is the facilities and equipment replacement fund. That I think I'm not sure why it was originally budgeted there, but I don't think it was planned to stay there because currently the fund balance for 105 has been depleted, and so we can no longer have the additional funding in Fund 105 to pay for that lease. So what we're doing instead of doing 105, we're gonna the MSRC grant pays for a portion of the Tesla lease. It's 125,000, so that will be in the MSRC grant portion, and the 244,000 will actually be a line item in the police department's budget under Fund 101, and so that's what that represents. So together, those two amounts will pay for the Tesla lease.
So William, the overall effect of this will be zero for the total budget, right?
No.
For the Tesla lease?
But
For the
for the
enhancement?
Tesla,
Oh, for the
only
Tesla.
for the Tesla payments, the lease payments.
Well, it's
So you're just moving it from one fund into,
right. And so
General fund,
instead of
right.
moving the money over into Fund 105, we're just going to pay directly from the grant fund, and the remainder will be paid from the general fund,
Right.
which
So-
is 243,900.
so it's a net
So we're
zero
not
effect
increasing.
on the total budget.
Well, I would say the net of the citywide $80 million budget
Yeah.
is zero. However, the general fund is increasing by 243,000.
Yeah, I was talking about the general citywide.
Yeah, the
total.
overall, because it's
Yeah.
coming out of, but Fund 105 doesn't have any revenues that come into it. So it's just, we can't continue to have it's one of those funds that was negative as we look through. So instead of, this would have just made it more negative. So we're trying to do some of that cleanup. So moving that back into the general fund, which actually has revenues, is the more appropriate place for this. So to your question, it doesn't increase the overall budget, but it does increase the general fund budget by 243.
This covers the lease. Does it also cover the expense associated with the charging stations and maintenance of the charging stations?
oh yeah, where is all that?
So MSRC grant does also pays for some of the charging stations. The ongoing sort of like electric costs, those are in the, I believe those are in the
The operating
general.
costs.
Yeah, those are in the general fund already. we do
Okay.
get revenues, and people pay for charging, and so those are already those operating revenues. The capital costs are paid for from the MSRC grant.
Okay, and this is going to be in the police budget next year, yes?
It's going to be in the police budget now, and then it will continue every year, until I think it's 3 more years.
Yeah, I guess the Tesla lease is the MSRC grant cover through the term of the lease, or is there a gap somewhere?
Yeah, the MSRC it goes the next. It was a 5 year, and it's a 5 year lease, and it was a 5 year grant.
Grant,
So,
okay.
it will
When
partially
does the
fund.
lease end?
Well, so I think there's two different. Um, it came in 2 phases. So, I think 2027 is the first 10 cars, and then 2028 is like the second 10 cars.
So we have to start thinking about,
Replacement, if they need to be replaced, there's certain we're already evaluating like certain of them. The leases are really just a financing mechanism. There was no assumed value of those cars at the end. Sometimes you're when you lease,
but do we get them after the lease end?
Yes.
Oh, so we do own them outright?
Yeah, we own them. We own
Okay.
them outright at the end. So at that point, we'll evaluate.
I mean, I'm
A
sure
portion of them probably
functionally,
won't. We'll have a couple more years that we can
Yeah,
get out of.
okay.
them, so.
And the city council recently adopted a new vehicle replacement policy. So there were some changes made.
Right, so the net between the revenues and expenditures, will be asking for a 92,000, almost $93,000 from general fund reserves to pay for these enhancements. There's another enhancement I wanted to mention, which I don't have a slide for, but it is in the agenda. It's right after the enhancement table. It looks like this. Yeah. So these are the CIPs. They're currently funded in Fund 400. So what we're proposing is to move everything out of Fund 400, and allocate that 29.1 million over into the different funding sources that fund the CIP projects. And so there are a couple of things. Well, first of all, I think City Council has been requesting that at least since I've been here, to actually do away with Fund 400 and all the transfers in and transfers out. But some of the benefits of doing this transfer, so eliminates the need to transfer funds, number one. And it increases transparency in the budgeting of the CIP. So we'll know exactly the CIPs, if they're funded from multi funding sources, we'll know exactly how much each and every one will have. And so it also it makes it easier for reconciling. And so that's one of the benefits we have, which is it makes it right now the way it is a little bit more complicated to do that. And the other one, it improves the legal and restriction compliance for projects that are funded from special revenues. So in this moment, it's up to the department to track their costs in accordance with what the agency or the grantor is saying they have to do, can spend by. So that it's a challenge right now. And so by doing this, I think it'll make it much more easier to track and comply with them.
And I just wanted to add to Vice Chair Quade's point earlier is this won't necessarily increase the overall budget because it's just an in and out. But it will just increase sort of transparency in that you'll now know it'll be much easier to show all of the different funding sources for a particular project.
Sorry, could you remind me? So this 20 something million, right? Of transparency. The CIP, it sits outside of the general fund? Is that correct?
Correct. So just sort of think of it all of these 200 funds, all the funds that start with a 2 are all special revenue funds. And so there's Measure R, which is all when you pay sales tax, a lot of that goes to different transportation and so we get a piece of those. So Measure R is one of those, which is additional funding. Measure M, SB1, which is a state law that the state passed a few years ago. So as a city, we get a local return for all those, but they're all restricted. We have to use them for streets or transportation uses. So what we had done the last few years is just understand, oh, we have the Fremont Huntington project, right? So we're going to just transfer money from each one of those special revenue 200 over to this just fund 400. That was a catch-all. And then you just have one project and it has one budget. The problem is, as from an accounting standpoint, is we need to track and report to make sure that the agencies that give us those special revenues, they're spent in accordance with how they're given. So it's a little bit more difficult when they're all kind of commingled. So what we're doing, and it's going to be messy this year, but we figured this is a good year to have it be messy, which is why we're doing it mid-year, so that it's a little clean. It's cleaner as we go into next year's budget. But what we're doing is basically taking it back out of that 400 fund, and say it was a $10 million project, but 3 million was Measure R, 2 million was Measure M, and 5 million was SB1. And we're just going to have those go back to, instead of $10 million here, they go back to having, it's still one project, but it'll have three funding sources. And that just that just makes it a lot easier to really identify how is this project being funded, right? It's being funded with Measure R, Measure M, SB1 funds.
Right, but all those are considered special funds
Correct.
outside of the general fund, right?
Yes, they're not. They're separate from. They're not in the general fund. That is correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
And Nick, that was part of the problem we had, I think, when we couldn't, getting reimbursement, right? Does that relate to some of our reimbursement issues?
So sometimes, yeah, I think also, when they're commingled, you don't, for a grant, for example, if you commingle it with other funds, it's hard to, it doesn't stick out as much when you don't get reimbursement, because then sort of these other funds cover the negative that you get from not getting reimbursed for grants. So now we have a grant fund that all of our capital grants are budgeted there. So we know exactly, you can tell when something's negative. You can tell when we spent the money but haven't received the revenue. So it's a lot easier from a finance standpoint to follow up with the departments and ask them why they haven't submitted, or if they have submitted and maybe a check's in transit. So
Huge task. Congratulations. That's a big deal.
Okay. And if you go to tab 4, attachment 3, you'll see the monthly budget report. And this is the format we will be providing the budget report, the monthly budget report, on an ongoing basis. So the next report will be in March, and it'll be through the month of January. And so it'll be the format, and then we plan to have it as a receive and file on the agenda.
So, if I may, in Commissioner Giuliani had kind of referenced it earlier today, but this is, we're trying to make sort of monthly reporting a little bit easier and more digestible for the non-finance or the non-staff folks. So this was our attempt. We're breaking out by each department, and sort of, monthly. We just wanted to show the budget, but by month, so you can kind of keep expenditures. You can easily see where we're exceeding the budget on a monthly basis. And then we did the same thing for revenue. So we'd be happy to hear any feedback from the commission on if there's a better format, or if there's something you'd like to add. This is sort of our first iteration of this. And then again, to what Will had said, is similar to the treasurer's report, where we like to include it as a consent item every month, which gives the commission opportunity to take a look at it, but also can pull it if there's anything you want to talk about. We will, going forward, we'll include this budget report each month. And again, if there's anything the commission wants to talk about, they can always pull it from consent. If not, it's a receive and file. So we'd be happy to hear any feedback on format.
So for the graphs, right, since they're all increasing, is it year to date? Okay.
Yes. And so basically for all the graphs, you have the budget number. So the June budget is actually what the total budget was. So each, like July, the first one is like 1/12 of the budget. August is 2/12, right? So it's just showing that progression of the monthly progression, and then the blue or whatever color the actual is, that's the month. Again, it's July will be the first month, and then we add August to that, so that's the cumulative. So again, we're trying to stack up to show the year to date, where we are compared to the budget.
Nick? I thought you were going to add budget and actual and the percentage. I
We
don't see any percentages here, and this is not easy. It's easier for me
Mhm.
to have
Budget
the actual for the
Mhm.
period, the budget for the period, the variance, and then have year-to-date actual, year-to-date budget, and your percentages.
So what we can do is underneath each, and I'll use expenditures because they're a little easier. So um, we'll just use the first, let's see. Let me go back to the city manager's office is the first expenditure one. Underneath each of those, there is there's a little graph that's
Yeah.
budget. They were kind of tall. They're kind of small, so we can work on. But you can see underneath each is a table, and it has got budget and it's got actual underneath that. We can add a couple lines. One that has variance that just subtracts, and then the percentage
Yeah.
each month. And
I
that
think
way.
the percentage is the most critical because then when city council is looking at something and they want to figure out if there's enough money to do it, then they can look at the percentage that's been expended to year to date and what's left. And it seems to me like that would be a lot easier to figure out than having to. I don't expect them to spend a lot of time sitting and trying to figure out.
Yeah, we can certainly add percentage. It's pretty simple to just add. We'll just add a line with percentage. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Nick, I'm sorry, Commissioner, did you want to have the percentages on the graph or did you want them like on the table?
You know what?
Because we can add them on.
I'll give you a sample of what I'm thinking about.
Okay.
Okay? I'll bring it to you or email it to you, send it to you, talk to you about it.
And Nick, for
Pretty
us,
straightforward, yeah.
Social Security recipients, this is really small print.
I had to get my magnifying. glass.
Really, I did. I actually got a magnifying glass out.
I did too.
Love it. Love the data, but it's hard to read.
Yeah. No. Agreed. And
Yeah.
and part of it is just Tatiana did an excellent job putting this together, kind of last minute. So we're also trying to automate this through OpenGov. So now we're going to work. We wanted to make sure that from a format standpoint, this was good information for you, and then we're going to work on getting it automated, and that format will make sure it's much more readable.
So can I weigh in a little bit?
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, it's a little out of my
No, go ahead.
scope. I think this is a really great start. I agree, I think, but to me, I'd make the numbers bigger. I mean, this chart should be a 8.5 by 11 page. You know what I'm saying? Like, because I want to look at the numbers.
Yeah.
And I think the graphs, almost because there's so many, it's almost a little bit too much given that the numbers are so small. It's sort of like takes my attention away. So, I don't know whether we need each department by month. I don't know what you guys think. Or do we just need it like as of today, a bar graph? Like, I'm not sure the trend line is that important to me, but what do you guys think?
Yes, fine.
Okay.
You want me to run it by you first?
No.
You-
I would, but you know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like this is great. On the other hand, it's almost like there's a little too much of the bar graphs. I
The
think,
bar graphs
the-
I love.
do you?
Yeah, I'm visual, so.
Okay.
so bar graphs.
So you like it by month too?
Yeah, I do like.
You
it.
do like it by month? Okay.
Yeah.
And if I may, we can work on things like we can make it landscape so that it's this way instead of portrait, and that can make the numbers bigger. I think ultimately, if we can get feedback on, and I think we need to we also need to understand that there are going to be many different users of this information. So, what may not be interesting to you may be interesting to someone else. So we want to try to give a decent amount without going too much and giving data overkill. So, I think the percentages is a great idea. We can easily add that. We'll try to see if there's different formats so that it's a little
Maybe
bigger and readable.
try, I mean, the actual is almost irrelevant on the bar graph, right? It's just a straight line up. So all you're seeing is the budget, which is what percent of that bar graph line it's filling. So maybe you can maybe even do a line graph with percent numbers. That may save a little more space.
Right.
Right, just 1% number, like X percent of budget, you know.
Yeah, and that's actually pretty easy to add the instead of that blue, we'll use city manager's office instead of having the blue bar. That can just be a line, and then those data points can be the
I'm just
percentage.
trying to figure out how to keep
Yeah.
it both like compact and with
Yeah.
all the information that people have
N-
requested.
Nick, you said something very important, though. You need to be
Yeah,
able to,
like,
Actual, and
yeah, like.
like a line.
Yeah.
The line.
The actual doesn't, almost doesn't matter because it's just like one straight line that's divided monthly, right? It seems like the.
Yeah.
Well, no,
No,
because the
No,
actual.
it's
Yeah, actual is
it's the
what
budget,
changes.
the budget that's divided.
the budget that is,
Yeah.
Yeah, the budget doesn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
matter 'cause it's straight line going upward.
Correct.
right.
So I know what you're saying. So you're saying the budget would be better as a line graph.
A
Yeah.
line graph is.
Yeah.
Percentage of that budget.
Kind of
Yeah.
cash in, cash out.
Yeah. Yes, kind of. Yeah, that makes sense.
All right.
Nick, you said something very important, though, in a couple of paragraphs ago, and that is this has got to be easy. Because if this is going to be a month, something done monthly, it cannot chew up a whole person's 2 weeks. It can't chew up a half an FTE for a month. Okay. Just, I put one number in, hit the print button, and it shows. Okay. So and I think your city council will hear ease over detailed. And if somebody wants to do a deep dive, I have Tatiana's #1 speed dial. We can do it. Okay.
It's got to be something simple,
It's
simple,
got
like
to
it
be.
just come from the general ledger.
Got to be.
You know, we don't want to make a lot of work for you guys. You've got enough to do.
Right.
But
Right.
just getting some information, some useful information to the city council is, what,
goal.
what is. yeah.
Well, and it's going to come to you first, and then it'll
Yeah.
come to, yes.
But back to Nick's point about there's different users, because I would think that this is a very useful tool for the departments, right? So those graphs, the lines, the actuals, I mean, that, even if we may not want to necessarily see every department every month, I think for them, they would want to see that. So just making sure we're meeting all the user needs.
Your department chairs are going to want to.
Yes, exactly.
Numbers
So
look good.
basically, on page 1, it was initially a little confusing for me just because we have the adopted budget and that's a cumulative. So every month it's actually cumulatively adding. So by December, you'll see the total is 20.6 million. But then I look down to December, it's 2.9. So maybe do a cumulative budget, a cumulative actual, and then a percent, and then literally copy that graph and just do a percentage of cumulative actual to cumulative budget. That way it's all on one page and everyone can see what by expense line item, kind of cumulative, budget actual percentage.
And so that's what the actually like the city manager's office of community development. So each one of those graphs is cumulative budget to cumulative actual.
Right. I'm just saying,
Just trying to help you with the format.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to consolidate it down because, yeah. I mean, it's nice that you then break it down, but then you have people, like, for people that are okay with just looking at numbers without the graphs, I could then I could see on one piece of paper everything I need to know. And then I don't even have to look at the.
Yeah, so I think even adding to your point, maybe under the expenditures on this first page, page 1, that is kind of the under the expenditures is the total, and that total is by month, but you're right, above it is cumulative. We can add a line that has cumulative, so then it will, and then under that we can have the percentage.
Yeah, so basically, like this has like 2 blocks. So one block is the budget, and then this is the monthly, and then a cumulative block, and then a cumulative percentage block, and then that kind of has everything in one page
Yeah, that makes sense.
Oh, and
for,
everything's
for
like-
revenue and then for expense.
Yeah, that's an easy fix. Or an easy add.
Just for reference, are we using the new technology to build this?
Oh, so we're not using, well, Springbrook, not the new Springbrook yet. We're still actually, Tatiana, Will, and Mark are doing, and Ashley are doing a great. Ashley's our senior accountant, by the way, are doing a great job of actually digging into Springbrook. So it's gonna that will be another few months for that implementation. We OpenGov we've engaged, and there are software that will help us automate this. We wanted to get the format first so that we can give that to them and say, this is the format, and then they'll automate the report. So all we need to do is we do one monthly upload into OpenGov, and then the technology will hit the button. So this particular one, we didn't use the technology, but the next one we will.
Kudos to you, whoever had to put this all together without the technology. Good job, Tatiana.
And so with that, we're open for questions, but I think we've ready.
You haven't had enough?
Any comments, Commissioners? Zen? Madam City Councilman?
Thank you for hearing us.
And so if we're beyond the mid-year and the monthly report, this was a very robust item. There's actually the forecast as part of this as well. So if you'd like, I can move on to the presentation for the 5-year forecast.
Give me a second. I just want to take a pause and like maybe a congratulatory moment. I mean, I think this commission, before even I was part of it, I think the city council has been asking for this sort of transparency and accountability. And that was our theme, kind of start the year. Monthly budget reporting, on-time audits, right? Like, and I think you've accomplished a lot in a very short amount of time. And I do just want to take a pause to congratulate the team, especially Nick, that you've put together and the folks that have been here a while. It is incredible to see the amount of progress in the amount of time that you've had. And it instills in me, at least, a lot of confidence in our city and our city government. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, we want to echo that.
Yeah.
The entire team, yes.
We were reminiscing or crying about what I was earlier with Tatiana and William and a little bit with Mark about where we've come in a year. And it's been incredible. It's really remarkable. And it's so refreshing and so just, it feels good to be getting the information and to be having this kind of dialogue. So I know we thanked you, but I can't even begin to describe how great this change has been.
Yeah.
So thank you.
And for Mark, it hasn't even been, for Nick, it hasn't even been a year.
Yes.
I don't stress about getting the meeting packets anymore.
The other thing I also want to commend you is just any question we throw at you, you know the information, and that's really refreshing because it means that beyond just the presentation, you understand and know your data. So thank you for that.
Mhm. And you don't talk in circles. It's a direct answer.
Before we go, the self-insurance fund is just a wash, essentially.
Yeah, self-insurance fund yeah, correct. So there was one other adjustment was the self-insurance fund. We did have some settlements. We've been cleaning up this year and have settled a few claims. So our insurance, we did ask for a $750,000 increase in expenditures, but we do have those are all within our deductible, so we're getting reimbursements from our insurance for the same $750,000. So it is essentially a wash.
Except you'll see the rates go up in the coming
Right,
years.
right. We're
Okay,
gonna
all
have to plan for some increases. over
Okay,
the
as long as
next
you're
year.
planning for that.
Yeah. So as a segue into planning for the future, we also have our first iteration of a 5-year forecast. So, let's see. Oh, yes, sweet. So good evening, Chair and Commissioners. As we head into fiscal year 26-27 budget process, staff has prepared a 5-year forecast for the general fund. As outlined in the staff report, the forecast provides a 5-year view of revenues, expenditures, and reserves using conservative assumptions based on historical actual data and known contracts in place. The key assumptions, which are described in the forecast cover memo in your packet, represent staff's best estimate of the most likely conditions at the time of the forecast is prepared and is intended as a planning tool rather than a prediction of exact outcomes. We plan to update this forecast twice per year, first in February or March. Well, we do the mid-year as we just did tonight, and to prepare for the upcoming budget season. And then second in September, using the sort of tentatively audited financials. So when we have year-end close, so in September, we want to update this again based on full year-end numbers for the fiscal year. The goal is transparency and early visibility of trends. So big picture overall, based on assumptions included in the forecast, the general fund is expected to remain relatively stable in the near term. Revenues are projected to grow modestly, and expenditures are primarily driven by staff salaries, pensions, and healthcare costs, which is expected as a service-based organization. You're almost always driven by salary and benefits. As illustrated in this graph, over the forecast period, cost growth generally tracks revenue growth, and general fund reserves remain well above the minimum reserve policy of 25% of budgeted operating revenue. So that the dashed blue line is sort of the minimum 25% reserve. The green line is sort of the projected ending reserve each year. So revenue assumptions. These are the assumptions on the screen that we're using for the major tax categories. Revenue projections were developed by taking into account 5 and 10-year historical averages and are intentionally conservative to provide a strong base for future financial decisions. So as an example, property tax historical 5-year growth was 5.8%. We're projecting more closer to 4% over the next 5 years. In sales tax, historical growth was near 5% over the last 5 to 10 years. We're projecting a little over 3%. And we're not necessarily assuming extraordinary growth or one-time windfalls over the next 5 years. Those may happen, but we don't necessarily, by definition, they're one-time or they're windfalls, so we're not necessarily planning for those. And just so you know, in the cover memo, I try to add like the 5 and 10-year historical average for each, so you can kind of see that we're not just closing our eyes and throwing a dart at a dartboard. We're trying to stay within historical averages. On the expenditure drivers, again, those are salaries. The personnel are the largest cost driver for expenditures, which means that they actually are relatively predictable, but they're also negotiable in times of tight economic activity. So we have a little bit more control over expenditures. All 4 of our bargaining units have MOUs through June 30th, 2028. We have a 6% COLA in 25-26, and then 4% in 26-27, 4% in 27-28. So those are planned. Those are already in the projection. Those are easy. Beyond that, we assume 2.5% annually, subject to bargaining and fiscal conditions. So we need to have some sort of, we want to have some sort of inflator, but understanding that when we get to that point, we'll be able to evaluate whatever financial condition we're in at the time. I'm sure 2.5 years, the economy will be different, but that's the condition we'll be bargaining in. So we'll be able to have a little bit. If things didn't go as well as we thought in here, we obviously make those adjustments with the bargaining units and vice versa. We also assume the contributions per the CalPERS. We have included the contributions per CalPERS actuarial schedules, and we assumed 5% growth in CalPERS costs for the next few years, and then tapering down to 4% for the last 2 years as our workforce composition shifts towards PEPRA members. So PEPRA members are a lot. They have a different formula and they contribute a lot more than classic members, so it's a little bit less costly for the city. This is just our general, our sort of professional services and our operating costs. Many of our multi-year professional service agreements include escalators based on CPI. So the 5-year CPI average through June is 4.3%. The 10-year average was 3.4%, again through June. So we're projecting about a 3.5% increase in our professional service contracts because again, those are primarily typically driven by a CPI escalator, and that aligns closely with long-term trends without assuming elevated inflation, which if that happens in the future, we'll have to make those adjustments, particularly on a when negotiations come around the next time. Reserves and fund balances. So the forecast tracks projected ending unassigned reserves each year and compares them to adopted policy targets, again, which is 25% of operating revenue. We're not at this point assuming any ongoing or projecting an ongoing structuring use or a structural deficit. So we're not seeing any potential use of reserves at this point. So again, we're looking at relatively at maintaining our existing fund balance at about where it is, which is about $19 million right now. So risks and monitoring. So this is the special sauce, I guess, of a forecast, and where we just need to make sure that and why we are updating twice a year so that we're kind of staying on top of when there are changes to what we think is going to happen. So again, forecasts are directional tools to show us where we are headed at a point in time. As with all forward-looking tools, there are a number of risk factors, both known and unknown, that are outside the city's control and may alter the current direction, including economic changes, state funding shifts, pension actuarial changes, healthcare cost trends, future bargaining outcomes. So to mitigate this risk, the city really needs to be able to pivot as these risks arise. This is achieved by active financial management through regular forecast updates and economic outlook. So again, I believe in January we discussed with you all the economic outlook. So just keeping those up to date just helps us make sure that we're not blindsided. I mean, there's a lot of shocks to the system that could happen that we can't plan for, but as long as we're keeping an eye on it, we can pivot. So the medium-term labor contracts that we have, the 3 to 5 years, those tend to be a good place to be because although there's less certainty over a long term when you have shorter labor contracts, it does offer more flexibility to respond to changing financial conditions than a 10-plus year labor contract would. Need to be locked in for a lot longer. And then finally, the robust annual budget process and a strong reserve balance protects against short-term shocks to the system and gives city management and the city council some runway to develop practical options when faced with fiscal uncertainty rather than taking a hasty action. So that's why we want to have our rainy day fund. As we look ahead, the first iteration of a 5-year general fund forecast illustrates that revenue growth and expenditure growth are generally aligned under current point-in-time assumptions. The next iteration of this forecast will need to include major planning efforts that will be addressed in the upcoming budget cycle, including setting aside funds for vehicle replacements, increasing funding for the self-insurance fund, addressing deferred facility maintenance, and developing life cycle standards for IT replacements. So it is anticipated that this needs will be addressed through establishment of internal service charges for each department. So through these charges, user departments will provide regular ongoing funding sources while building all of those costs into the annual operating budget rather than treating them as sort of ad hoc costs that are funded if and when there are extra funds, which is kind of what we've been doing for the last few years. So this will really operationalize those by making them internal service. So we've already begun the process of identifying savings in the existing operating budget that can be used to offset these recurring internal service charges without significantly impacting the overall general fund operating budget. So while these are cost centers that aren't currently in the budget, we've actually been doing a pretty thorough review of our existing costs. And there are a number of places where there's overlap. We might have multiple contracts for GIS consultants as an example, where we're working on pulling those under one contract, and then we can get rid of those other contractors. Another example is one of the software that we had, this Questica that we canceled earlier this year. That's going to be a savings from an annual basis. So we've been really trying to cancel places where there's duplication or there's efforts that we don't need. So because with the understanding that we're going to need to flip those savings into actually funding some of these operational costs. So we don't expect there to be much of a impact because we want to fund those with savings. We'll know, you know, as we go through the budget process, you'll see a lot more of this built into that, and we'll be, you know, very transparent about where we found savings and where we're recommending that it goes into, you know, building these long-term operating needs. So with that, I will try to get to our last slide. There we go. So I welcome feedback on, you know, assumption reasonableness, frequency of updates, level of detail desired in future updates, and any other comments or feedback from the commission.
I just had an initial question. So there was a lot of, I think, time and money spent getting a 5-year forecast tool a few years ago. I'm assuming this is a new model, right, that you've developed on your own?
Yes, this is Microsoft Excel. So I mean, ultimately, I mean, you can get really fancy, but a model is only as good as the inputs. And you know, I think personally, again, that's why I think you use a financial forecast as it's a directional tool, not necessarily. None of us have a crystal ball, so you can play, and it's fun to play with all the different inputs. That's why we really look backwards to see what sort of the average growth is, because we're sort of a little bit different than a private sector company that, you know, invests to make income or plays the market or, you know, can control how many widgets we sell, right? We're really, you know, we have relatively stable revenues because it's taxes and, you know, the way that we do taxes, people don't get to decide whether they want to pay us or they want to pay Pasadena. So we know what we're going to take in every year. And again, because we're mostly service based, we know what we're going to pay out because we already have, you know, 3 years of labor contracts. So, you know, for the most part, although none of those are fixed, they're relatively simple to kind of get a directional where we're going there.
Right. And, you know, frankly, the tool that was presented a few years ago, I think was Excel based and was pretty just a fancy version of Excel. And so like definitely not trying to say that it's a negative that you've created on your own forecast. The only reason I mention was because they did build in certain assumptions, right? And there was a methodology to those assumptions. So I was just wondering if that was at least like referred to say, hey, what was kind of the thought behind like the assumptions they pulled then? Is it similar line to what, you know, you have considered for the current forecast? And like you said, you know, for governmental, a lot of it is very predictable and steady. So I can't imagine that it's that far off, but just curious.
Yeah, my understanding is that there was a lot of discussion around the last versions of the forecast. So I mean, I think we tried to come into it without any sort of previous bias, or we just, you know, I was just trying to put together the tool that I've used in other cities. Where it gets really useful is when we're in negotiations and we say, okay, we're looking at I'm just going to use a dumb number, but we're looking at a 15% increase for staff, right? Then that's easy to plug into here, 15%. And how does that impact us going forward, right? So that's where this kind of helps from the decision-making standpoint, is when we have a large financial like ongoing decision to make, and how does that impact, you know, some of these. And a lot of times that some things, although they feel like big increases, don't have a huge, you know, might be a small piece. Like we have a bunch of these professional service contracts, and you know, maybe there'll be a 5% increase in some of those, but it's only 20% of our budget. So if we only have a 3% increase on 80% of our budget, but a 5% increase on 20%, like it's not as huge, it's not as big of an increase, you know, it washes out. So that's why I think we tried to really focus on categories and where the direction of each one of those categories is, and make sense as to what our projections were. Like particularly, that's why we use CPI on professional services. So
yeah, I think that seems very reasonable on the expense side, but like on the revenue side, for instance, property taxes, sales tax, right? What kind of resources are you looking to kind of get those kind of future outlook? Because I think maybe that's more like, you know, external economic data, right? So we're,
Correct. Yeah, I think so what the property tax, again, because it's such a large part of our revenue mix, is actually it's a very lagging it's a lagging indicator of economic activity. So when if we hit a recession today, that won't hit our revenues and property tax for 18 to 24 months because for this year, your assessed value is already established and you're paying your property tax. So you're typically not, even if you're going to qualify for a reassessment, your house would have to go down quite a bit in value for it to actually be assessed less than what it currently is assessed at. So oftentimes, and in the 2008 housing bubble, for example, a lot of cities saw, you saw a big decline in revenues, but that was 2 years. That didn't happen until 2010. That's when we started to hit us. So I say that only because, for if we do experience another shock to the system like the 2008, we will have time to respond to it and to react to it. With property tax being such a large piece of it, sales tax is a little bit, that's more like 6 months behind when we see those. But again, that's a smaller piece of our revenue mix, only 10% of our revenue. So, so again, we're I've done it before where I tried to do like, let me do a min max and but it doesn't always help that doesn't add much to decision making a lot of times. I mean, other than it's fun to play in those. But we can certainly, I'd be happy to, like look at some of those. We can have and I think the last projection did this where you had like, you had sort of expected, right? What we put together was most likely. And then they had like if
it's a
there was,
simulation, yeah.
yeah. So there was like a, well, if things go well, like economic growth or economic decline. And there was there was a min max. I, those are just really hard. It's hard to like, I mean, I think we're already kind of conservative. Where we pegged our revenue numbers are actually like 1 or 2% below what the historical average has been. So again, we're trying to make sure we're definitely living within our means as opposed to assuming that we're going to make more and then have to pull back, right? It's much easier it's very hard to pull back when we have labor contracts and that type of thing. It's much easier to add to a budget on an annual basis if you do better in the previous years.
Mhm. Sorry, and I don't mean to monopolize all the
keep
questions.
going.
My final question, and then feel free to
Keep
move
going.
on, is like, when I was looking at the 5-year forecast, so your page, I don't think there's a page, but it's the one with the numbers, right? The forecast page. So, I was trying to just kind of like understand high level why years 26, 27 and 27, 28 goes kind of negative with a deficit, and then it goes back to positive. I think that it's related to those short-term MOUs is kind of how I understand it, right? Is that correct?
Yes, so it mostly is related to, again, the MOUs having the 6%, 4%, 4%. And when Todd, even when he presented it to City Council, he's like, I know that we may be sort of spending on the credit card a little bit now. And that's even how we talk to all of the labor unions is like, we need to plug. It was like the dam had all the water coming out of it and we were plugging holes. And that attrition was very much related to our salaries being extremely low, right? And I think it's been demonstrated because our attrition rate when he started was like 30%, and now we're down to like 12 or 13% of people like moving in and out of the organization. So that was his major effort was to get those paid, like get those in place so that we could keep people here and recruit talented folks to come. So we knew that the first couple years of that plan were going to be a little bit tighter, and that's what's reflected here. After those first couple years, now what we know is that we do have the expenditures we're predicting to kind of slow down to 2 to 2.5%. That's typically a kind of like just a normal like COLA adjustment when you're not doing sort of a market salary adjustment. We obviously don't know what the market's going to look like in 3 years, but we'll know what our actual revenues were over the last few years, if we did better or worse, and we'll be able to adjust at that point. So, but that's why, because the salary plan um, was to get people to stay here, and then we have to have our revenues catch up to that, which they will over a couple years.
Yeah, I guess that was my only concern is like, you would have to kind of sustain that the the expenditure side, right, to prevent the same thing from happening. So is it like maybe like the out years are a little bit understated on the expenditure side if we assume that, hey,
I mean, they could be. I mean, if you look historically at we've been city governments were kind of in the 2 to 4% for a number of years in the late 2015 to, there was a lot of adjustments. So there's a lot of things that will happen through bargaining. I think we needed to put, do we know much about the out years? On the expenditure side, that's certainly the most, um, the biggest unknown is sort of what the MOUs will be at that point. We do want to put something to keep those escalators up, but we also don't want to put in something where unions may think, oh, well, you owe me that money. You already built it into your, so we still need that's why it's a negotiation at that time.
Yeah, I think for models, especially these 5-year I appreciate that we're doing this, but it is hard, right? Because you want to be conservative on the revenue side, so you're underestimating revenue. You want to be conservative on the expense side, so you're overestimating expense. Well, then lines are going to converge if you go with that. So something ends up giving. I do note that there's no CapEx in here, so I don't know if there's maintenance CapEx at least built into this. But then really for a 5-year budget, what I'm most interested in is if we know of large expenses that are coming or large contract renegotiations that are coming. Those things, as opposed to drawing a straight line with percentages, I mean, that could go either way, right? Is more just looking out 5 years, kind of what do we see popping up? Like, do we have a big contract? Like, I think a couple of years ago, our arborist contract took us by surprise. That was like a $600,000, 600,000. Sorry, I keep working with large
scale. Yeah.
600,000, like 700,000. It was like a large contract. Like it was just these things kind of popped up that no one was necessarily expecting. So, and then with our roads, right now that we have an X amount that we need to put on roads, do we need to figure out what we need for fixing water systems in the future? Like that's actually more helpful instead of like this is also helpful. I'm just saying like almost like a list of what are the large line items or the contracts in the next 5 years that we see potentially causing issues. And then because I understand some of the insurance stuff, like on the expense side, salaries we had to do at 2.5 because we only did revenues at 4, which was so it's kind of like you got to give somewhere if you don't want to panic everyone. And realistically, we're not in a situation where we need to be panicked, but right, like kind of what are the red flags? Like, is insurance going to be a red flag a couple of years down the line? Is that growing or any line items that are growing or expected to grow significantly higher than the rest of our revenues? So let's call it our total revenue grows at like 4%. Is anything else expected to significantly grow, significantly more than 4%? Like these kind of red flags going forward,
Yeah.
I think is more helpful to me.
And so, I think those risks that I put up there, and I think September will be a much more meaningful update to this because, again, this was kind of our first iteration. When we get to September, we'll have gone through the budget process and we'll have been able to build in those self-insurance fund charges, those vehicle replacement charges, the facility maintenance charges. So we'll have like a better idea of those savings, right? We've been working on them, but we won't have a big picture until March when we meet internally with all the departments and start like collecting all of the data. And then in September, after we have the adopted budget and we have a better idea of what the actuals are for this year, I think that will be a more meaningful, to your point, some of those, we'll know what our insurance premiums are for 26, 27. We'll get those again. We usually get those in May, June. So that is one of the risks. So we'll know what that increase looks like, and then we can build that in. So those are probably the biggest red flags. What we put on there on the risks are the vehicle replacement set asides and the self-insurance fund. The The CapEx stuff, like that's almost all in those special funds. So again, we focus on just the operating fund, the general fund. That doesn't mean that we don't, as we move forward, we do need to have, that's what this capital, we've been looking at a 5 to 10 year street repavement plan. That's why we do our pavement management index, pavement management plan. We have a water and sewer, like pipe replacement plan coming up. So those don't necessarily impact the general fund, but they are plans that we do need to bring forward. And those are all going to go into sort of different planning buckets. Not that they're not important. It just, that wasn't the focus of tonight, but we definitely are looking at some of those. Yeah.
The point about looking at the prior consultant report, I think maybe just take a peek at what their assumptions were, just to kind of check and say, hey, I agree with this assumption. I don't, like, this was good, this was bad, this was way out of line, and et cetera. Just so you also feel comfortable with the basis of your assumptions. It looks like,
Yeah, we own the contract on that. We actually purchased that software. So
yeah, there's like a
yeah.
full Excel that you should have access to that you can
Right.
play around with.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm looking at Will because I hope he saved it somewhere that's easy to find. So
Yeah.
we'll take a look at it.
Dig it out of the dumpster, Will. Yeah. Yeah, got it.
Or I feel like
It
Sheila
was like
probably
a
has it somewhere.
$25 or $50,000 Excel
Oh,
project.
I got the report,
But
yeah.
There are several items that we spent money on that I think we've determined now, maybe some of those were sunk cost.
Yeah,
I don't know if
limited
this is
detail.
one of them.
Yeah.
Questica is one of them.
Yeah, no, but yeah, I think I want to say Sheila got the Excel version of
Yes.
that
yes.
forecast.
I
Maybe
think
she-
one of the problems with that forecast was that, I think Nick said it, it's sort of the quality of the input,
Yes.
the data that was input. And I think
Right, that's why I'm
I
saying
think
just-
that, I think we all lived
Nobody-
through that.
maybe, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But I'm not poo-pooing that tool. I think the tool, everybody agreed, was a good tool. Of course, that was the second attempt. As you might recall, we had 5-year projections
Yeah.
from one consultant that weren't
Yes.
good, and then we had to get a second consultant. And I just want to say, and Nick doesn't even know that. I mean, the whole reason behind, we didn't have 5-year projections. And so when a budget came to us in 2023, that was a negative $2 million budget for the general fund.
Mhm.
We'd held our nose and passed the budget, but said a couple of conditions. One of the conditions was bring us 5-year projections, because let's demonstrate to us that this is sustainable. And then it kind of went from there. I also want to say on the MOUs, Nick, and just so to your points, and I don't know if this is true, but the other thing about the on why we go down like the first 2 years and then we kind of even out is, in addition to just the COLAs, there was also a lot of negotiated reclassifications or some additional like they can go up 5 levels. Well, I think they might have added like a 6th level. So I think in these early numbers on the MOUs, you're going to see people paid more initially because they're going to higher levels, and then the COLA rate kicks in.
Yeah, that's correct. And also, I never count out, I'm going to segue into Mark's presentation, CalPERS and actually the impact of PEPRA members. So part of a kind of a net benefit of hiring a bunch of new staff is that many of the staff are post 2012, meaning that they're not classic members. So that they're, just as an example, a classic member, just non-sworn, costs the city, I think it's a 20% or so. Say it's like 18 or 20%. So if you make $100,000, we have to pay 18,000 to CalPERS. If you're a PEPRA member, it's only 7.5%. So for a $100,000 employee, you pay 7,500. So it's a fraction for PEPRA, and because they have a different benefit and they pay a little bit more into their own. So I think the each year you see our CalPERS, it's still going up, but it stabilizes a little bit. It's not going up as quickly because we have more PEPRA members. I mean, I think even the report that Mark has, it shows that we've got a pretty significant number of PEPRA members now, and 10 years from now, most people, it'll probably be all PEPRA, so that we won't have as many sort of expensive sort of legacy employees.
Nick, I don't know if are you finished? Is that? Yeah, okay. Nick, I don't know if you are aware of this. even if or even if it exists. But our city managers and CEOs, CFOs like yourself, are you having conversations about how we're going to use AI in the future? And is that part of your thinking? I mean, I can't imagine how you would, but then again, 2 years ago, I wouldn't imagine AI even existing.
I use AI on the daily. I use it pretty significantly,
Okay.
but I don't, that's kind of a secret.
Okay.
I want everyone,
All these presentations,
all of these
AI
amazing
generated.
presentations
Okay.
and all of the notes and all the staff reports are all 100% my brain. I'm not using AI at all.
Okay. Wink, wink. Okay, got it.
But we've been using them. It's a very useful tool to even analyze contracts, right? If you can upload contracts and ask for help, analyzing some and just some suggestions on, questions to ask. So I mean everyone's using AI tools in their day-to-day work, in all industries, but it's certainly useful here as well.
And the reason I ask is it going to have any budgetary impact, high or low, in the next 5 years?
Yeah, it may. I mean, right now AI is sort of using the model that they're just kind of like Copilot gets tacked on to
Right.
your MS. So
Yeah.
so there's not necessarily a separate like a separate cost for AI at the moment, but it may bring those costs up. It may just be part of our software packages that we're already sort of paying for.
Okay. Just curious.
I'll ask my assistant Jerry, aka Chat GPT.
Yeah.
I'll ask Jerry if AI is going to increase our costs over the next 3 to 5 years and see what he says.
Mine is Celeste.
I just had two quick ones. Going back to Commissioner Ho's comments about why we're negative. I mean, why wouldn't you just find that negative in the operations and break even?
Why wouldn't I hide it?
No, yeah. It's not hiding it. I mean, you'd find in a year, let's
Yeah.
just say we go through a recession or something. You're going to
Yeah.
find the budgetary
Correct.
saving somewhere.
Yes.
Why would you show it?
I think it's again sort of I don't want it to feel like we're sort of funging the numbers just to kind of make them work. I mean, obviously to a certain extent you do over the 5 years, but I mean I think it's really it's valid to show like this is over the next 3 years is what we look at because these are our expenditures and we don't want to I probably could have bumped property tax a couple more percent and made it not negative, and that's honestly probably realistic. Realistically, I'd be surprised if we actually have a negative, but I think it's again from a directional. I mean, it's a policy decisions that have been made. It's showing like we're going to eat up whether we go negative or not. We're going to eat up more of our revenues than we otherwise would have because of the some of these labor contracts. So I think it's just a way to show that. Yeah.
Sure. And then my second question is, we talked a lot about operationalizing deferred. Is that here? Where's the discipline? How do we continue to kind of show the transparency?
Yeah. So I think in it's there in that our expenditures are inflated because we have savings we've already found that we're going to be turning into operationalize those internal service funds. That's why I say though the September one will be probably a little bit more not accurate, but I'll have a higher level of comfort because at that point we will be building in internal service funds. I'm actually gonna probably in the next iteration I'll break out the internal service charges as their own category so you can see the operationalizing of those. We don't have internal service fund charges now, but I'm very confident just knowing already sort of a lot of the savings we found that we'll be able to fund them out of our current expenditures without having there be much of a net increase, if any at all. But those are that we'll go through that again in May with the commission and when we go through the budget. So you can hold us to that and say where are my internal service fund charges that you promised. But I do think the September version of this will again it'll just be even better.
Sure. I understand it's a fluid kind of process, but yeah, I think a separate table might be interesting. Other questions? Any public comments on this item?
We have one. Josh Betta.
Finance Commission, I enjoyed Janet mentioned that she was reminiscing about things. Remember all the years that staff would and the council would label budget preparation as our budget season. And for 90 days, we had a cocktail party where there was never a trade-off and never a difficult technical decision the council was asked to make. Well, those things have changed now, haven't they? We also had to go through the pain of the staff going out of its way to deceive and to lie. And Pete and I have that PTSD, don't we? To the 5-year, probably the most important thing that you're doing tonight is considering this. Nick and staff are showing you that after adjustments and transfers.
Nick, get closer to your mic, Josh.
All right. Is that better? Hello?
Barely better.
This year, we're estimated to have an outcome positive of $60,000. In the next 3 years on the graph of the 5-year projection, you are looking at overlapping lines. You are looking at converged lines. The important thing to take away is this. Will there be trade-offs that the staff brings to the city council? And I would suggest that we're finally going to see decisions that require trade-offs. As an example, if we add in $243,000 for the Tesla leases that were hidden from us in the past, is there a choice for something else not to be done? This is the first in a generation that we're going to be able to entertain technical decisions. And it's been my desire that the city council be prepared to have these conversations. I certainly encourage that. I wish that for us. And I appreciate what the commission is doing tonight to identify these things, and hopefully they are communicated toward the city council, whereas 5 people rather than 2, these things can be studied, that knowledge applied, and we make sincere decisions that have to do with trade-offs if they become required. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh.
Mr. Chair, do we have to vote on receiving and filing the presentations we just received?
No.
You don't need to, but I think it would help make us feel like you support us if you did a vote to
All right.
receive and file.
Anyone want to move to receive and file item number 4?
So moved.
Seconded.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. Great. Received and filed. All right, let's continue to item number 5.
Hey, Mark, could you level set for me and tell us what it is about these CalPERS and OPI that I don't know and I need to know as I listen to your presentation? Just sort of give me 250 words.
250 words.
That's not a lot, trust me.
What you need to know or you want to know?
Yeah,
So you want him to know what you don't know and tell you what it is that you need to know?
no.
I think this is time to ask Jerry, your assistant, to help you.
No. ChatGPT would tell me, okay? Just level set. What are these things and why are they important?
In a broad stroke, these are monies that you will have to pay over a long term. It's not something you can pay off right now. You can't just write a check and say we're done with it. Not like a lease. You can just pay it off. But you need to be strategic in knowing that these are coming at you, and there are ways to pay for part of it now. and plan for it also at the same time. The focus in the last 10 years has been taking these numbers and putting them in the back of the financials and say, you have $100 million of cost coming up, but burying them and just saying that it's a number that some actuaries created based off highly technical models and are very reliable, but they're not coming at you right now. But they have taken them and now put them on the financial statements in the very front and saying this is a big deal. And the people who want to know this are the people who are offering you debt, credit agencies. They want to know how much do you really owe versus put it way in the back. So they slowly moved the pension liability in the back and put it in the front. And then a few years later, they said, oh, how about OPEM? That's the same kind of, maybe not as big of a cost, but it's still a cost that you are obligated because of, in your MOUs, you might have been saying you're going to offer this benefit to your former employers or employees. Pension's the same way. So they're trying to get it in front of the finance commissions, the finance staff, city council. You can't run away from these costs. These are obligations, and you need to start finding solutions to them now.
That was Zen's question. This is one of those things that is out there, one of those landmines that are out there. And if we're not thinking about it on a regular basis, you validated what I assumed. Thank you. But to Zen, that's exactly what you were talking about a few minutes ago. What are the landmines out there? Okay, thank you, Mark. Appreciate it.
And to level set for our commission, right? We're not hiding from it anymore. Like we're putting it out in our commission. We're going to talk about it. We're going to get the presentation on it. We're a full service city, and this is a big line item in our budget. And so we do need to continue to look at it and plan for it because it could impact our budgetary positions.
You're here.
Yeah, and so, I mean, this is very high level. We're just kind of explaining what OPEB. So OPEB, first of all, is other post-employment benefits, but it's more like retiree healthcare costs. And then there's pension, which is CalPERS, which is, there are two different liabilities. I'll kind of go from piece by piece and how what the long-term number looks like, and then also how it affects our current budget we're in now, and then how we plan for it next year, and it's part of the 5-year outlook, 30-year outlooks. But so I'll go kind of over what they mean, and then how it kind of affects us now in the long term. Sorry, go back one. I'm just gonna and kind of give a brief overview of what the pension liability is and what an OPEB liability is, what drives these numbers, and what the risks are, and then also what we as a finance department are trying to do to help mitigate these. I mean, they're still out there, but how can we plan for them better? So, brief overview. The city provides two different types of retirement benefits where the city is paying money. One of them is a pension benefit, which we are contracted through CalPERS, much like most city and county agencies. But also we have a OPEB liability, which is retiree benefits. And I'll explain how these are calculated and how the costs are derived. Again, like I said, it's not something you can just write a check today and be done with it. They span multiple decades. CalPERS has this 30-year smoothing, and they based off all your employees and when they're going to retire and how much salary they're going to be, and very complicated. But they do this every single year, and then they say, "Hey, here's your share," and then you can track it out on the way. But as of June 30th on our ACFR, our pension liability is $47.2 million, and our OPEB is $13 million. So it's $60 million that's out there. Again, we're not the only city. Every city is facing this issue. It's a long-term problem, but it is slowly creeping into your budgets now, next year, 2 years, 5 years. So that's kind of why you have to be on top of it. Some background on how we got here. In 1946, the city joined CalPERS as a member agency. Back in 2015, GASB 68 started taking that pension liability, which was in the back of the financials that no one was really looking at. They said, we want to put it right in the front. And it's here it is, $50 million, or now it's 47.2 million. Look at it, like big number. Start looking at this. 2018, same thing with GASB 75. I took OPEM and took that $13 million number as a footnote and saying, what are you going to do about it? These numbers are not just something that Nick and I calculate. It's based off CalPERS has a whole group of pension experts that they have on staff, and they're running numbers. So they come up with all these numbers on their own. They have a bunch of tools online. If you really want to like dig into it, you can actually like do all these projections and stuff like that. It's really handy. And then we also hire a third-party actuary, Foster and Foster. They do our OPEB liability. So they look at all of our employment numbers and what kind of benefits we provide, what kind of health care are they using right now. So they look at it and kind of straight line it out and say, hey, your number right now is $13 million long term. One other thing that was done as a mitigation effort was in 2022, the city joined the CalPERS CERT Section 115 Trust. It's kind of like an investment fund. We put $1.12 million into it to kind of say money in the bank to help pay off our OPEM liability. So it's like, hey, we don't owe $14 million. We actually have $1 million in the bank. So our net is $13 million. So it's money we can put away. You can actually get pretty good returns. I'll explain that where we've gone. But when you have extra money, you can actually put money into this bank, quote unquote bank, and invest it wisely to help pay off. So in a rainy day fund, it's like our annual cost for OPEM is about $500,000. We can actually draw down from this $1 million and say, hey, you know what? We're short this year. We will, to help balance our budget, we want to pay for some of our costs. Maybe not all of it, but some of it. It's a way to help balance your budget down the road. So you can kind of put money away for a rainy day. So why do these benefits exist? As Nick kind of mentioned, we want to have recruitment, retention. So you'll see some people might leave to go to a county agency because they have a better retirement plan. So you want to have good benefits that will keep staff here long term. So it's to help recruitment and retention, and that which will help promote stability and keep institutional knowledge. And then this will provide retirement income. So when people are ready to retire, they'll leave and not just stay here and collect a check and not keep efficiencies. We also want to keep continuity and quality of public services. The city does provide some other benefits in addition to pension. We have a 457B plan, which is just a income tax code. It's just like a 401k plan. It's just for government employees, it's called a 457 plan. So we provide a 1% contribution based on their salaries. And we also have a 401A plan, which is just for the city manager. But it's a separate kind of plan. It's just the way income tax regulations work. And then we also have a plan for a part-time employer and part-time employees called the PARS plan. It's just a separate plan that provides some benefits to keep them here to work here, but also some retirement savings in the long term. So how are pension plans how are they? The benefits are based off years of service, your retirement age, and your final compensation. And so based on those factors, We get two different types of pension costs. One is our normal cost, which is based off your current salary we're making each year. So you might make X amount of dollars. The city has to pay like 8%, 10% of that salary, and we pay that on every 2 weeks. We say we have to pay CalPERS. Here's our salary. Here's the percentage of that, and we pay that every 2 weeks. Can't be late. And then we have what is our UAL, which is our unfunded accrued liability. This is based off past contributions and then our future payments to those retirees. That shortfall, that how much we have to keep paying to kind of make sure we can fund these pensions 20, 30 years down the road. So that you have two options. You can pay it monthly or you can pay in one lump sum. If you pay in lump sum, you get usually about 3% savings. And I'll explain that later, but it's just, that's why you see in the investment report, you'll see that big payment out in July is because I believe it was about $4.5 million. We paid up front instead of paying it monthly, and we get that savings up front too. Fine. So again, when CalPERS is doing all these actuarial reports, they use a return assumption of 6.8%. That's kind of based off of what they feel safe with, based off historical trends. Just giving you some data in 2025, they actually had a return of 11.6%. But in 2008, 2009, it was the opposite of that. So right now, CalPERS funded status is at 79%. As of June 30th, and then at December, so 6 months later, now they're at 84%. So the returns have definitely helped CalPERS get funding almost to 84%. But I think back in 2008, they were saying they were down to like 50%, 60%. So they've gotten much better since then. They've kind of stabilized, but they've also been very prudent in how they say we're only going to do 6.8% because we don't know next year it could be 2%, it could be negative 5%. So market volatility does affect our future contribution rates. Now related to us, our employer contribution rates range anything from 8% to 23%. That's based on if they're a miscellaneous employee versus a safety, which is police and fire. And then also based on classic versus PEPRA. Again, we have different rates. So as employees are retiring, the classic members, you'll start seeing costs of the employers going down because we're going to be paying more like 8 to 10% versus 20 to 23%. So you'll start seeing that shift in the next few years, probably. Again, our funded status for our plants are around about 80% for miscellaneous and 74% for safety. Again, the workforce mix, just to explain, the classic members are those that were hired before, or will join CalPERS. Maybe they're not hired here, but if they join a government agency prior to January 1st, 2013, that's a classic member. And anyone who joined CalPERS at any agency from January 1st through 2013 on. So anyone who's college graduates coming out, they're all going to be these PEPRA members. They'll be at the lower cost. Some key issues and risks are, obviously our rate volatility is based on market. So hopefully we keep having 10% returns, but again, we don't know that. But CalPERS is very prudent, saying 6.8% is kind of what they like to use. Again, the aging workforce and life expectancy, you're seeing people live longer, so that they have to kind of keep that in their calculations. And again, there's some things we cannot control based on state law, CalPERS. We can't just leave and say we don't want to pay this anymore. We are a contracting agency, so it's something we have to plan for. And then also, Now that these liabilities are on our financial statements in the front, it affects our credit ratings. But again, we're not the only ones that have this problem. Every city is seeing this $100 million, $200 million liabilities on their balance sheet. So it's not exclusive to us only. So some current strategies that mitigation that we've been taking into account is again talking about the lump sum payment that we do in July. That saved us $148,000 instead of paying it monthly. So we do keep into account cash flow, but it does save a lot of money. We actually use the actual rates in our budget. So when we're creating next year, we're kind of looking to see um, how much we're going to pay out for the UAL, but also how much pension contribution rates we have to pay for our salaries that are in place. And then we also use those projections in our long-term forecast. Now, OPEM, which is our other post-employment benefits. This is mostly retiree health care. It's just completely separate from pension. It's a whole nother program. It's driven by healthcare inflation, demographics, and our benefit design, which I'll go over. And historically, we pay it as we go, but except for the CERT, which we started in 2022, that was like a one-time cost. We said, hey, we're going to put some money away to help fund this down the road if we want to use that. So how this affects the city is for those employees hired before July 1st, 2020, we have a formula which uses the PIMCA minimum, which is the Public Employees Medical and Health Hospital Care Act, which is it's like a certain amount and it goes up by like CPI. And then plus an HRA contribution. So we will give them $625 max per month. Never goes any higher than that. So PEMCA might go up, and that means we give a little bit less on the HRA. So that's capped. Now, for employees hired after July 1st, 2020, we just do the PIMCA minimum. And again, that gets inflated every year. So it's $162 a month. In 2026, it might go up to like $164. But again, it's very tiered as it goes up each year. As I mentioned, our OPEB liability right now is at $13 million. We have the CERT, which was our initial contribution was $1.1 million. Our balance as of December 31st, 2025 is now $1.62 million. So it's roughly a 10% return year over year as it's been invested. It's invested in CalPERS invests for us, so it has, and then we get monthly statements, quarterly statements, and they show us our returns. So I pulled that from their statement. So and they have I think we're in like a tier 2. It's like not the most aggressive one, but not also the least aggressive, right in the middle. That's a pretty good return. Some other key issues relating to OPEB is related to healthcare cost inflation, retiree longevity, and using these PIMCA minimums. Also, we have to follow PIMCA as part of an MOU, how much we're going to contribute, and then we also give some credit rating considerations. Again, some mitigation things that have been implemented by the city is back in that we went from that $625 a month. Now we're down to the PIMCA minimum, so that saves roughly I think about $500 a month. There's one effort that's already in place. Setting up this the Section 115 trust is another way to kind of cut down our liability. Is we have this money as assets, and so it looks like we have money to help fund this stuff down the road. And we also budget based on these actuarial projections. So we look at it and say, how much are we going to have to pay in 26, 27, and we budget for that. And so we make sure we have enough money for that. So how does the pension and OPEB kind of affect the current budget or now? So CalPERS costs $6.9 million in 25-26. And then the OPEB costs $525,000 a year roughly. So that total is about 11% of our operating costs. So just to give you how much that costs. Again, we haven't budgeted any other like one-time funding. Like, hey, we want to put some more money away into a Section 115 trust. I mean, we could, something to consider, but right now the budget does not have anything built in. Some other future options to kind of consider are, do we want to do some more UAL payments in addition to the minimum we have to do? We can put away some extra money that will knock down our liability, but it's one of those policy decisions. We could put more money away into the CERP that we already have open. We could put another 500,000, a million, whatever the number is, and that will be invested and grow over time. Something we can do. In addition to the CERT, you could actually set up a CEPT, CEPPT. It's a pension. It's another type of 115 trust. You can put money away and you can invest it. Again, you would have to take money away from our own investment portfolio and put it away. Something to consider. And then there's, again, other ways you can do it are through the retiree health savings or defined contribution plans to help offset benefits to employees. And then another one is pension obligation bonds, which is taking on debt to pay off these other debts. So you're pretty much getting money from someone else to refund like your pension. So you're just taking debt to fund other debt. So it's kind of not a great policy, but sometimes if interest rates are right, it's a good funding strategy, but not something I'm comfortable with. But it has been done. Some people do it, but it is an option if you have the right rates to do it. Some next steps. Just receive and file this presentation, and then also ask staff for any feedback, provide any feedback. Would you like us to, incorporate maybe some other funding into next year's budget, or look into other strategies? We can always come back with those kind of things. And I'm available for any questions. Nick obviously is available for any questions. But this is just trying to give you like a high level. I know our auditors will stress, your OPEB is this, your pension is this, so we want to kind of give you what does that mean and how are these numbers derived. It's not just a number made up by the auditors. It's not a number made up by CalPERS or our third-party actuaries. They do look at trends and historical data, but also returns and healthcare rates. And there are a lot of factors that go into it. So we rely on those numbers to help us budget for next year, 5 years, 20 years, 30 years down the road.
Thank you. Great presentation. Comments from the commissioners? Is this like maybe it's at the city council level, a policy decision that maybe we invest more into some of these trusts, Section 115 trusts, or is there like an established anything at this point, or?
Yeah, so we don't necessarily have a policy set up. Some places, and again, this is when you probably are on more. Not that we're on good financial ground, but I think just the last few years we haven't had a good planning opportunity to plan for things. But sometimes what cities will do, or some strategies are, if there was if you end up last year, after your audit and you had a $1 million like surplus that was actually realized, sometimes you can take a piece of that, have a policy to take a piece of that, and you put 20% of that into the next year's, into the Serbit, or the 115 trust or whatever. So I mean, there are different funding strategies that you can use, especially like a lot of times cities will use, rather than, they'll use the pay as you go strategy on the retiree health, but then when there's one-time windfalls, then they'll put that windfall into the trust. So The only issue with the trust is it reduces your flexibility. Once you put money into a trust, you cannot take it back out for anything other than paying retiree health, which is good for that's why you get extra credit for it for putting money in there, but then it hurts long-term flexibility than if you had it like in your own reserve. So, those are policy decisions. And again, if the finance commission thinks it's, wise to at least recommend to council that we look at sort of some kind of funding strategy for some of those, perfectly, like that would be a good opportunity to kind of put together a recommendation. If not today, just someday in the future as we go through the budget process or whatever that might look like.
Yeah. It feels like it's something we should be thinking about, but as you said, for the last 3 or 4 years, we haven't had the luxury of having extra dollars to deploy. So thank you, Mark, for helping us understand what the options are. And goodness gracious, we should be talking about it.
Yeah, and I think one thing that Mark said right at the beginning that is very true, and people don't realize that even if South Pasadena ceased to exist today, we'd have 30 years of bills to pay, because we do have those pension promises and those retiree health promises, and actually that we're obviously not in that danger, but a bunch of years ago, early 2000s, a couple cities up north looked at filing bankruptcy. I think Riverside as well, and like you can restructure a lot of your debts, but pension and retiree health debts are not typically restructurable. So even if everything else goes away, there's still taxpayer funds that need to go toward these, which is why, just going back to the planning, that's why it's important to plan.
Can I just clarify, for my own understanding? So right now, according to the presentation, we have unfunded pension of 47.2 million, meaning on our books, there's liability of 47.2. Is that correct? And then on the UAL then, when we make those payments, are those reducing that unfunded, or are they preventing an additional liability from growing? So like the 3 point whatever million we saw booked, right, at the UAL at the beginning of the year with a 4% saving, is that just to prevent the liability from growing from 47.2, or is that a reduction?
So that kind of represents prior years unfunded. So what happens is every year, CalPERS has a 6.8%. They used to have a 7.5% target. They've reduced it over the years. But what happens is, say they have, we'll just use 7% because it's an easy number. Say it's a 7% target. So they're saying, we have to pay CalPERS this year based on assuming that they get a 7% return on investment. If they only get a 5% return on investment, they still charge us. They're getting their 7%. So they charge us that 2%. And that means next year that gets added to your UAL, because the prior years, so the UAL, the unfunded actuarial liability, is actually all of our accumulated unfunded debt from previous years that's been stacked up every year. Now to years that they make 10%, that will make the UAL decrease a little bit. So paying that UAL is actually you're just paying the unfunded from the prior years. So it's to make it stay at $47 million, to your point.
Yeah, that's my
Yeah.
question. So how does the UAL and the?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
basically to make it stay at the $47 million. If you don't pay that full UAL at the beginning, or in the year, then your 47 million will actually just will go up.
So right now, assuming our strategy is just to pay the UAL, this 47.2 stays there on our books, right? There's nothing planned for the pay down of it. Okay. And then for the OPEB, so it's 13 million unfunded, but we have this 1.6 million sitting in a trust, right? So that nets against it effectively.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the 13th, the net number is our liability is really like so when on the financials you'll see it says OPEB liability, then there's the assets, and then the net OPEB liability, that's our net OPEB liability. So they like to look at it as
Like 14.
what you
Okay,
still
the
have
13 is the net of the trust.
correct.
Okay,
So
gotcha.
they want to see how much, like, so if we were to put $13 million into this another trust, it actually would be at zero. And we actually mean wipe away for at least for now. But that number and the 13 million is a net number.
Okay. got
Because
it.
it's just saying how much money do you like put away for already.
Okay, but then every year they'll do some kind of actuarial like report. So the 47.2 could be going down if they earn more, right? So that's the
And,
latest.
and the actuarial reports are always like a year and a half behind because the way they look at it, I mean, they have to get all the data, but those investment returns of 10.8% won't be reflected until about a year or two from now because the way they do the trends and they have to look at retirements and stuff. So the valuations are done as of June 30th, 2024. That's for our 2025 audit. So it's only like a year behind. And then they run it and then so some of those investment returns, we might actually, our liability might drop down because it's been a really good year. But we won't recognize that probably until I'm hoping I think the next one will come out in August and we'll see hopefully some pretty good returns there.
So I was trying to remember, like vaguely, I they were saying, like you said, they're 1 or 2 year like behind, but then on a good year, the 47 will actually become 35. Like it
Yeah.
lowers significantly.
If you earn.
And then if that's the case, and then we choose to pay it off on a good year, call it a 35 year, what are we hit with the next year after we've paid everything off? Are we just trued up at that point and nothing else happens in the past? Or like, and then it's only going forward if they don't hit the 6.8 mark, or what happens?
Sounds so okay.
So
So the
I-
unfunded always just an estimate, like.
Yeah, it changes every year. So I came from one of those agencies that would make Mark uncomfortable. We did a pension obligation bond. We had a very different we actually had a special tax to pay for it, right? So we did and we did it in 2022 or 2021. So we got like a 2% interest rate. So we refinanced our 7% interest with
Yeah.
CalPERS at 2%. So it made a lot of sense. We wiped out our debt at that moment in time. However, the next year, actuarial assumptions change, and then there was a little bit. So we had another, we had $1 million, like actuaries. So it would go from 47 to 0, but then it was like $1 million a year after that.
Okay, so but then that's much more, but then it's on a zero basis.
It's on
so,
a zero basis.
So it's only like a million or two because you've trued up, but
Yeah.
you got the benefit of like that $12 million drop.
Correct. And if they beat the 7% in the prior year, you would be super funded. You'd be negative. So for example, in the early 2000s, a lot of these plans were super funded because, CalPERS was invested in all the tech bubble. So we didn't even have to pay anything for a couple years
Right.
to CalPERS because it was like we were 110% funded. And then all of a sudden the bubble burst, and then we had this. We were so it would take us to 0, and then we would go from 0, but it would still every year it still changes.
Yeah, but then if you're at a zero basis and you're super funded, even when the bubble burst, you got knocked back down a little bit, but you don't have to it never exploded on you, right? Because
they use this 30-year smoothing. So they basically, even if all of a sudden you owed $10 million, they spread that $10 million over 30 years. If it was like a $10 million swing, if you had a $50 million, if you lost 20% of your value, so you had $50 million and then, you lost 20% value. So you only had $40 million, and that $10 million, because you say you're at 0 with the 50 million, the $10 million would get added to the next year, but you don't have to pay it all in 1 year. They smoothed it over 30 years. And then every year, it's like this cake that every year they'll.
So basically, we're waiting for a year where interest rates are low, the stock market's great, they revalue this thing lower, and then we can potentially do a bond and pay this off, have a low interest rate, and then kind of set our balance sheet up.
So I'm going to go back to one of your earlier comments about all the various long-term liabilities we have. I think what we find ourselves in as a city, and this is the beginning of actually getting a clear financial picture, but I think we're also waiting to get a clear picture of so much deferred maintenance, pension liability. I mean, the air conditioning. I mean, this building needs work. The Orange Grove building needs work. we're working on the golf course. We're looking at the library. That's kind of been deferred a little bit, but the street bonds, it's just really, it is going to be, I think what Josh was saying, it's going to be priorities and trade-offs. I think that this commission is going to be critical because we have a lot to do. And it's just really a matter of priorities.
The 47 also grows by the 6.8. Like, what's the carrying cost of being unfunded?
So if all else being equal, $47 million is point in time when they do the actuarial. So what happens is if like life expectancy and all of that and number of doesn't change next year, and CalPERS hits 6.8% on the dot, then we stay $47.2 million. If they are 6%, then our 47.2 goes up to 47.4, right? Or if they're 8%, our 47.2 will come down to like 46 and a half. You know what I mean? Like, so every year it'll change slightly based on that. It's pegged to that 6.8%, and then also all those demographic.
But that's just an accrual. I mean, when you pay actuals, it's going to be based on actual. So it's just an estimate at any
right, because they're estimating they're estimating what someone's pension is going to be, which you don't know until they actually retire.
So do you have any data right now? Like, how does that 47.2 look like over the years? Like, has it been improving? Has it been like radically swinging higher?
Actually on page 5 of my staff report, I kind of just show just from the year before to currently, it actually went down by $594,000 of net pension liability. Because the actuarial, a lot of the things that they use hasn't changed. So we've been paying as we go, but like the investment returns have been pretty good, and we haven't had major swings in terms of our number of employees, things like that. So look at there's like a table for the amount when we have on our financial statements actually went down by roughly $600,000. So it got a little bit better.
Okay.
And again, but a lot of the assumptions by CalPERS didn't change too much. I think in the next year or two, hopefully we have more of a mix of dropping off on the classic members versus PEPRA, and then also just hopefully investment returns being a lot higher. It'll give us hopefully more of a funding status and have us pay less.
And I think one of the things that we can do to, when we come around and present next year's ACFR, we can certainly do more of a historical look back, just so you can kind of see how it's changed over time.
Yeah.
I mean, to Mark's point, there have been fundamental changes that even though, like I said, CalPERS used to have 7.5% as a discount rate, and they've changed that. They've lowered that over the years. So every time they lower from 7.5% to 7%, they actually just have to add that to the cost of each city and to the liability. So sometimes you'll see our liability jump, which won't necessarily have anything to do other than they change the discount rate on us. So you'll see that over time, but I think that's probably a good thing to start including when we go over the ACFR is just maybe like a 10-year look back of what both our OPEB and our pension liabilities have looked like over the years.
Nick, if we're going to start raising this or putting this in the forefront of their city council's consciousness about how are we going to address it, or what we can do or should be doing to address this, we got to be teaching them about the historical nature of this challenge, and then how it came about and what can potentially be done. Mark, thank you very, very much for an informative presentation. I had no idea we were in this position, to be honest with you.
But is it true though? I mean, I don't think we're any worse off necessarily than any other cities, right? I think pretty much every city has some big liability on their books.
And to be honest, actually, our retiree health liability is relatively low. It's very low actually, because we only have the PEMCA minimum, and council did take that action 6 years ago to reduce it from the $600 to that minimum amount, which is the minimum by state law we have to provide that to every employee. So can't really go any lower, but that was a proactive action that council took, in that if we kept it at the 625, that 13 million could actually be 26 million right now. It would have a significant increase difference.
But there are three members of council right now that weren't on council at that time when that decision was made. So again, continually
Education.
educating them is going to be key.
Great. Any comments? Last comments? Any public comment on this one, Tatiana?
No, we have no public comment.
Thank you, Mark.
I think it's 11 o'clock in Indiana. So
Yeah.
that's it.
All right. We'll continue the communication section. Any comments from Councilmember Braun? No? Yeah.
Just thank you to everybody in this room for, this is just so wonderful.
Any comments from staff? Commissioners?
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you.
Nothing. Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you very much.
Incredible work,
everybody.
everyone. Yeah.
Very, very educational. Yeah.
Incredible work. Thank you very much. And we'll adjourn the meeting at 9:13 p.m. Thank you.
All right. Meeting. Yeah.